All right, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening. For those of you I don't know, I'm Jessica Alter. I'm the co-founder of Tech for Campaigns, and I'm joined tonight by several awesome guests. Some of them are TFC employees and some are not. So we'll introduce them as they go. I wanted to take a minute and just start things off, tell you what we'll cover. We can advance, thanks. I'm gonna tell you about a couple new team members that have joined Tech for Campaigns that we're really fortunate to welcome. Greg Dale, our Director of Campaign Relations, will talk about COVID and how it's affecting campaigns, and talk with one of our recent candidates, Andrew Learned. And then TJ, our Head of Operations, and Alan Bear, team lead for our website template team. We'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing there to make things easier and get websites out faster. And we'll take your questions. So without further ado, I wanted to kick things off and welcome three new-ish employees. I think new-ish probably for this crowd, but Jack Shea is joining us as head of product. A lot of you are probably familiar with Alex Lindsay, and she is excitingly on maternity leave right now. So Jack is helping us through this election cycle. He's been a TFC volunteer on several projects and a product leader at OpenTable, Microsoft, Pipefy, and Crowdflower. So we're really excited to have him. And then Craig Coaster just joined us this week as state director. He has a background in product management and management consulting from Bain and LinkedIn and Outpace. So we're super thrilled to have him. And then in a special return, TJ Rutkowski has joined us as head of operations. Last year, he was our state director for Arizona, which was probably the most campaigns we've ever done in one state. So we're thrilled that he's now going to be leading all of the state directors. He has a ton of experience in financial services and politics from Citi to Fidelity. So I feel very fortunate that we've been able to bring on some awesome people that are going to help us with our goals for 2020. We are still interviewing state directors. So would love to be able to spread the word if you can. So I think without further ado,
my
I'll
turn.
turn it over to Greg, and he's going to talk a little bit about how it is to campaign during COVID now that we know a little bit more. I think the last time that we talked about campaigning during COVID was really just 2 or 3 weeks in, and now the new normal has settled in. So Greg, why don't you take it away and talk about what you're seeing on campaigns?
Yeah, and then Andrew can tell me what it's like to be the candidate. So the kind of obvious statement that's worth making is a lot of what political campaigning is very much an in-person activity. And folks on previous all-hands have heard me talk about this, but knocking doors, going to in-person events are just a huge part of how candidates and campaigns spend their time. And so now we've kind of made it past the initial dizziness of what do we do now, and things have settled out just a little bit. I think in every state, things are, really a little bit different. And so we can hear from Andrew what it's like in Florida. But generally speaking, people are not knocking doors. And that's a major, major change of how campaigning is normally done. And it leads, leads all our traditional digital activities as kind of the next thing to do. So whether it's websites or text messages, phone calls, we're seeing a major increase an earlier increase in demand for digital talent across the board. And one of the things that we're monitoring is that it's a somewhat static talent pool out there. So there are commercial vendors that help campaigns with their digital needs. There's TFC, but there's not going to be a 3x increase in the number of vendors out there that are able to help campaigns Hopefully TFC can fill the gap, but we're really seeing a potential for a supply and demand imbalance to come in here. And what we're kind of hoping doesn't happen, but you know, the way these things normally go often does happen, is that state house and state senate campaigns below that level will get disadvantaged by that supply demand imbalance. There will be lots of congressional campaigns and people working on the presidential race in various forms who are going to be writing big checks. And if you're on the commercial side, that's business you want to go for. But on the TFC side, we're here to serve state campaigns, and so we are, don't want anything that disadvantages anybody to happen, but we are confident we'll be able to help meet that need in a number of states. It just so happened too that we've been pretty much a remote organization for 3 years now, and so the sort of there's not much difference to sort of the daily operations that we experience, and it's not something that we've had to kind of change. Like I said, every state's a little bit different. Some people are starting to return to something. Maybe they're planning sooner than others to get outside and start talking to folks in person again. But we're relatively, we're confident that no matter what individual COVID trajectories look like this coming year, you're still probably not going to want a ton of strangers knocking on your door and wanting to shake your hand. So it's something that we're ready to meet the needs on.
Greg, do you want to just remind, in case there are new people on the All Hands tonight, why we focus so much and so heavily on state legislatures? Yeah,
so state legislatures are the place that most legislation that affects everyone's daily lives happens. Obviously, there's like the Constitution and federal law that lay out a number of structures, but when you're thinking about things like gun safety, healthcare, roads infrastructure, LGBTQ policies, those are overwhelmingly set in state houses and state senates. And it's a perennially underlooked area in terms of the political landscape, especially with a presidential race coming up this cycle in 2020. That's obviously going to draw a lot of attention as it should, but the sort of slow, methodical work of making sure that Democrats take back state legislatures needs to continue, and that's what we're excited about focusing on. And another thing, particularly for TFC, is that state legislatures are a place where the campaigns are meaningful, but not of a, they're not huge size, lots of resources. Joe Biden can hire 50 people to work on their digital department. Andrew can't. And Andrew relies on volunteers and a few staff people, help from us. But it's also an area that, in addition to their sort of potential legislative impact, it's an area where our efforts can have a disproportionate impact on the outcome of those races. So rather than just keep blowing Andrew up, we'll move on to actually hear from him.
But one thing I just want to add,
sorry.
One thing to just add, in addition to affecting most of the laws that I think we as collectively care about, including voting rights, the state legislatures in most states are in control of redistricting, which means they're in control of drawing the lines at the federal level. So they're this incredible leverage point that the Democrats have really underinvested in. And so if you think about who's going to draw the lines that will affect federal policies for the next 10 years, it's also actually the state legislatures. So it's just this really important and often overlooked campaign that has a ton of up and downstream effects. And so it just becomes the really highest ROI place to spend time.
Indeed. And the quick snapshot on where we are today, before we go to Andrew, is that we've now completed or started work for 35 campaigns cycle to date with 49 projects, candidates that you see over there on the right of a lot of different places. We expect to be helping over 100 campaigns this year and complete more than 250 projects. for folks all over the country. If you want to go to the next slide. The states that we're currently focused on and actively working in are Texas, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, Alaska, and Missouri. Alaska is a fun one, where Democrats and moderate Republicans have actually formed a bipartisan coalition to have control over the state house and try to not let the far right Republicans take everything over. And so it's become a really interesting place where, despite being a generally red state, local Democrats, independents, and moderate Republicans have banded together to form a governing majority, and one that we're happy to help protect in this upcoming election. So those are all exciting places. We'll zoom in on Florida with Andrew, just to do a tiny bit of introduction to Andrew. Andrew is a Navy officer and reservist, owner of a local educational tutoring center. His policy priorities, should he hopefully be elected, is expanding the job market in his district, healthcare, and investing in education. I know Andrew because we bonded over chatbots a few months ago. And so Andrew is a techie as far as political candidates go, very much on the techie end, and running in a really important seat as well. Hobbyist, that's right. Is running in a really important seat to defend a district that was flipped in 2018 and make sure it stays on the Democratic side. And so I'm excited to have Andrew here on the call.
Yeah, perfect. Hey, thanks. And I think before I even start, I just want to echo something that Jessica said about the importance of these local races. Just to put it in context, she's absolutely right. The class that will get elected in 2020 all over the country will be the ones that draw the maps that the House, House of Representatives, the U.S. Congress will be running in the 2022 all the way through 2032. And to put it in perspective, a U.S. congressional race, I think the average red to blue flip last year was something between like $8 and $12 million. Adams' race, this seat, District 59, we won with 57,000. So if you can win, in Florida right now, we need to win 8 of these seats. So if you add that, if you do the math on that, it is a much more economic path for how we can take back power to invest down ballot rather than fight in these super expensive seats. Obviously, flipping a R+6 seat is a lot more expensive than flipping an R+2. And that is what I think having a state legislature that can help draw a more fair map helps us do. So
sure.
I'll start by just like the district, I think, first, if that's okay, and then I'll just tell you a little bit about how I got here. So this is District 59. It's a suburban seat in Tampa, Florida. So this is actually the closest currently held seat by a Democrat in the state. He's vacating it to run for Congress, which is leaving it open and vulnerable. And then I'm running to fill that seat. I'm the only Democrat running for it, and there's 2 Republicans. They are exactly who you think they are. One of them, the day after, I guess it was the week after Parkland got into a fight on Twitter with one of the Parkland dads about his right to have his 27 guns running around. So these are the kind of people we're running against in these red states. Why I think, winning it's important to keep in the context that it's a binary choice. I am a Navy veteran. I'm actually still I'm a reservist. I'm an officer at Special Operations Command Central. So we do all the special operations missions within the Middle East area of responsibility. I actually got this job, and ironically how I got into politics at the same time. I was the Navy's lead planner for the war in Yemen for a period of time. And on Trump's third day on the job, I had been deployed to that job for about 18 months, and he ordered a mission against my advice, the advice of my colleagues, tweeted about it before the team went in and got one of our SEALs killed. And honest to God, that was the night I went home and I decided I was going to run for office. I'd never thought about it before. I came home, I ran for Congress in 2018. Came up short, but I think we impressed enough people in our fight where they took notice. So then as we were gearing up for 2020, Adam wanted to move on to the congressional race. And now I'm running to fill this vacant seat. And frankly, the party's been very helpful in helping make sure that I stay the only Democrat in it, so that we don't have the infighting that Democrats are famous for. But I'm excited. I think with any suburban seat right now, anywhere in the nation, I'm sure we're all in the same boat, facing, nationwide toilet paper shortages. Greg did mention I own a tutoring center. My business is down about 60% right now. If it wasn't for the PPP loan, I would have had to lay off employees already. And those loans, when they first came out, went to the big banks, or from the big banks to like their big, the big companies, and totally ignored us little guys. And I think that kind of sheds a light on like what's at stake this election. At the same time, Florida was refusing to help small businesses. They gave $500 million back to the biggest corporations in the state. So Disney, the ports, the airports, stuff like that. Our unemployment system is broken. I mean, everybody following this, I'm sure, is listening, thinking, well, he's the hashtag Florida man, and rolling their eyes at our state. But there are some good people here trying really hard to bring our state back into the 21st century. And it's going to mean we got to take back the legislature so we can reprioritize things and put people first for a change.
Yeah, Andrew, how has you're somebody that is pretty comfortable with technology versus many of the candidates that we work with. But how have you adapted to the sort of COVID? Like, what's your plan from here?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I'm a candidate running for office. I thought when you did this, you'd be kissing hands and shaking baby or whatever at this point, and that is not happening. So we're not doing events. Everything we've done has been on Zoom. I'm like a Zoom connoisseur at this point. We've done some fun things. We're doing everything we can to try to mix it up. And honestly, it's a weird environment I think we're in right now, because as a candidate, a lot of times we get measured by how much money we raise. That's like one of those things that's easy for reporters to track. But they're missing things like our social media engagement, our open rates in our emails are just astronomically higher than they've ever been before. To give you an actual number, our social media engagement this month was up 600% over the pre-COVID month, right? People just have more time to be on their phones, and they're pissed, and they're telling their friends about it. Same with our emails. Our open rates are about double what they were pre-COVID, which to me is crazy. We're doing little things. We did like I said, anything fun. So we did a Baking with Andrew show on Zoom, trying to get people engaged. Everybody, I don't think the Navy veteran special operations guy being a baker, very much off-brand. Everything was expired. Everything in my kitchen was expired when we went to do it. I learned a valuable lesson that there's a difference between baking soda and baking powder, which is apparently a thing.
That is a thing.
Right? You don't want to go down that road, the baking with me. But, it was a lot of fun, and we ended up getting like hundreds of views from it on Facebook. So like, while one door closes, I would argue that another door opens, because in no other world would I be able to invite in all these folks into my single bedroom apartment, dirty kitchen to see what life is like in the Andrew campaign.
Yeah, we call that authenticity in the biz.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's been good. And I think, to your guys' endearing credit, just especially like going back and thinking about some of the early days in this campaign. I mean, just simple things like putting that stupid box around the paid for by thing at the bottom of our emails. As a first-time candidate who doesn't know how to code an email or know HTML, that can take somebody hours. And having you guys be able to help candidates be able to look the part of a professional in the early days of their launch as they're getting their word out, I think really goes a long way. So I'm just thankful for the whole team. We couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah, and do you want to go? You were a WordPress aficionado. I think maybe I'll use that word. You met your TFC team. You want to kind of say a little bit about what the experience was like, what you kind of learned out of that?
Yeah, you guys just make it easy. Like what Greg said, I can make a WordPress page. If my HTML is wrong, I know the basics of how to go change, a couple lines of code here or there, but that's pretty much it. And linking something like NGP to the WordPress, that's where you start to lose me and things start taking hours. And honestly, then my campaign team is yelling at me because I spent an entire weekend trying to fix the color of a button when I should have been out at, this event or this event. I could have knocked these 400 doors somewhere. So, and I do think digital is one of those things where, frankly, y'all from all over the country can really help us in these swing districts, because you can just take stuff off our plate so that we can go have those voter engagements and call more people or be more present in the community, which is, frankly, what we're supposed to be doing. But a lot of times it's, you just get so sucked into the nitty gritty of a campaign, you don't have time for. So you guys have just infinitely saved me hundreds and hundreds of hours to be able to go do more of that stuff.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And glad to be supporting you. Thank you for running. Thank you for defending the seat, and excited to have you on board. For folks that want to check out the site, is it launched?
It is, yeah, it's live.
It is. What is the URL for those who want to check it out?
It's andrewlearned.com, spelled just like you learned it.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Andrew, for joining. Welcome to stick around for the rest of the show. We'll hear from one of our volunteers who created the template that your website is based on, or helped create it. So
if you want to stay on, there's already questions
for
you, but if you have to go, we understand.
No, I'm fine. I'm here.
Cool.
Good. So thank you very much, Andrew. I am just going to take a quick couple minutes to talk about our project spotlight on websites, because this is really the time of year when website projects are most needed by candidates. We're currently helping incumbents and state caucuses create or refresh their 2020 websites, in addition to candidates build their brand new websites. So far this calendar year, we've launched 13 new sites and have 12 active projects in flight. This number is going to grow substantially through June, and I encourage everyone to keep an eye on the newsletter for upcoming website project opportunities. The website teams consist of a team lead, a copywriter, a designer, and the front-end engineer to pull it all together. These teams typically commit 5 to 7 hours a week for about 4 weeks to launch the candidate sites. The example we have here is Deandra Salvador. Deandra is a candidate from North Carolina, District 39 Senate. This is really it's a beautiful example of what a team can do, starting with the TFC template, getting to know the candidate, really understanding her style, and then delivering a powerfully branded campaign website. It's mobile first, it's intentionally built knowing that more than half of her visitors are coming from smartphones. It also has very clear calls to action, which you heard Andrew talk about in his site too. The donate button is always top of priority for her. Deandra also wants to focus on getting people involved in her site. Both of these buttons are hooked up to ActBlue and NGP, her tools for getting donations and managing her campaign supporters. So again, this is a perfect example of a TFC website template in action. Our team lead was Julie Bear on this site. It's like I lost our site. Our team lead was Julie Bear. Patty O'Hara was the front-end engineer. Lisa Zera was the designer, and Karsten Johansson is a copywriter. Just speaking a little bit more about our website template, I'll bring on Alan Bear. As you mentioned earlier, Alan's a volunteer. He's the team lead on one of our internal projects, focused on enhancing the tool for all of our project teams.
Yeah, thanks, TJ. Yeah, so we wanted to update everyone on the work the team is doing to evolve the WordPress template that pretty much all TFC web projects use as a starting point. So the improvements we're doing fall into 3 categories. The first is around analytics and testing. So the recent web template, which teams will use now if they download it, has better analytics built in, so we can track exactly how the voters are, prospective voters are interacting with the site, what links and buttons they're clicking on, and then we can use that information to make the template work better so all the teams will benefit and not just one campaign running some analytics. So it really kind of pays off the TFC model. And the other thing we've done around analytics and testing is put in what's needed to start to do A/B testing, so we can really start to find out what works. So for example, TJ and Andrew just talked about the donate call to action, which on almost all sites is really important. So we can start to test kind of how intrusive those modals and banners should be, how much lift you get when you make them more intrusive, and is that worth it? And things like that. So we'll start to, that's in there now, and we'll start to roll it out and work with campaigns to really do these kinds of testing. So the second category of improvement is around mobile. So given the dominance of mobile, we're looking for places where the campaign sites can do an even better job serving those smartphone users. And one of the places we identified is the priorities page. So this is where campaigns tend to talk about all the great things they're going to be doing. Tends to be pretty text heavy because there's a lot of stuff they want to talk about, and tends to, in the past, sometimes overwhelm users on smartphones. So the new template has designs where campaigns where the page, they kind of give an overview of all the priorities, and then the priorities can be expanded, or the user can drill down and find more information. So it's much more friendly for a smartphone. In mobile, there's also, there are a number of CSS improvements, many of which have been driven by the teams that make the responsive design more consistent and require less tweaking from the teams to work really well. So that's all really in the release that is out now. The third category of improvements that we're mostly working on for the release that'll be out in a week or two are around looking at where the implementation teams have kind of been doing the same thing over and over. And can we bring that back into the template and do it once rather than having teams do lots of work over and over? So some examples of that are a COVID banner, which everybody needs to implement. So that'll be in there, and that'll also be useful for timely notifications like, hey, it's, here's the deadline for absentee ballots and stuff like that. Pages where a candidate can talk about their endorsements and talk about caucus members, a sample video embed, stuff like that, where we'll include it in the template as a sample so teams don't have to kind of design that from scratch. And doing this, obviously, we're hoping to make implementations more streamlined so teams can really focus on the added value, what's really required for a specific campaign, as opposed to what do we need more generally for it to work. So we'll be updating, that's kind of a summary of what's going on. There's a lot more stuff, some of which is called out in the slide. We'll be updating every week or two, as I say. So if you're on a web team, make sure you grab the most recent files before your team gets going. And this template team, it consists of Kim Wilson and Mel Choice, who have been on pretty much since the beginning and been running this, and Lauren, who is a newer member like myself. So those are the team members. Jack Shea also pitched in with the analytics stuff. So thanks, TJ.
Thank you very much, Alan. And it is really important that this team is helping all project teams right now. So I very much appreciate all the work, and the next couple of releases will be big to get out the COVID banner for everybody. Now we'll bring Jessica back and do a little Q&A. You're on mute.
If people have questions, you can post them in the chat and we'll start to answer them. TJ, if you can help. I think there's a first question for Andrew, actually. When you ran for Congress, which I'm assuming means last year, what was your demographic relative to age and social media effectiveness? Now with the COVID issue, will social media reach go up into a higher age group? Assume that your local race is smaller than your congressional race. Is your district more media savvy? So there's a lot of questions in there. Maybe talk a little bit about your race last year versus this year and how you think it's affected with COVID. Will social media reach go up into a higher age group? I'll just address that really quickly because we've done a lot of research on this, and then I'll let Andrew chime in. There's this feeling that social media is for young people. That is just not true. Everyone spends about 7 hours a day online. B, actually 55 plus is about 3 times more likely to click on a political ad online. So we've actually proven that with our own research. Partially that's because just younger people are more savvy, so they don't click on ads as much. But I just want to dispel the notion that online or digital is just to reach young people, because we hear that a lot from candidates that my district's older, so I don't do online. Facebook's biggest, highest growing demographic is like women over the age of 45. So that's not actually a thing. And I'll let Andrew talk a little bit more about his district and the demographics last year.
No, you're absolutely spot on. And it was really eye-opening, I think, for me when we saw the results coming in from some of the ads that we'd ran. Our over 65 demographic was definitely the most engaged of anybody, and then kind of like going down from there. It is certainly by channel, is I guess. I don't know what you professionals call them, but we'll say professionals. Like just like my Instagram feed, I don't have as many. Like my personal grandma is not on my Instagram, but she is on my Facebook, right? So I think that plays a big part of it. And honestly, so I would almost like take the premise of the question and kind of reverse it. I would think in COVID right now, because so many otherwise young working people are stuck quarantined at home, they are actually going to have more time online than they probably would in a non-COVID world, which I think is a good opportunity for us. One thing, the only real ad we're running right now is in Florida. We're making a huge push for vote by mail, especially in bluer counties where we hold the supervisor of elections seat. The Republicans statewide are preventing us from getting people to register to vote by mail. But where we've been effective in getting Democratic supervisors, like in Hillsborough and Tampa, we're literally mailing a request form to 600,000 people this week to vote by mail, and hopefully make voting safer in the November general election. The engagement, so we're running an ad trying to encourage people to fill it out, turn it back in, and we're getting a lot better result at like with younger demographics on that than we typically would.
Cool.
Does that answer the question? I'm sorry, there was a couple things in there, so if I missed something.
I think so. So I'll just ask this next question, and then we'll go to some of the TFC questions. And Andrew, you and I can tackle this together maybe. Is voter fraud an issue for vote by mail in your district, and what form does it take?
It is, so it's funny, here's the crude history of it. So in Florida, the Republican Party has been beating us silly with vote by mail for 20 years. And the Democrats just really didn't pay attention to it. And in every election that I remember, going back to like Obama 08, the 7 o'clock would hit and you'd see this huge jump for the Republicans where they would immediately register all the vote by mail ballots in that first 5 minutes. And all of a sudden the Democrats would start the election 5 points behind. And it was a matter of like, could we close the gap? And if we closed the gap, we'd win. But if we didn't, we lost. Those were all the vote by mails because, frankly, Florida is a much older state on average. And a lot of the elderly vote by mail. And it's really easy to walk a bunch of vote by mail requests through like a nursing home or an ALF, get everybody to sign it, collect them, bring them into the supervisor's website. Like that's all perfectly good and legal. And those are things the Republicans have done for a long time. The fact that now the Democrats are making an effort at this, now all of a sudden it's ripe for fraud and they're trying to shut things down. The Republicans are still beating us on vote by mail registration. Like we are playing catch up and we're trying hard to do that. And honestly, this is one of those things where like the strategist in me, I kind of lose my mind, and I'm kind of happy with the Republicans are doing what they're doing, because if I was a betting man, they're, crying wolf and creating this boogeyman of vote by mail. But the only people who listen to Republican boogeyman cries are Republicans. So I'm hoping they are going to be less likely to participate vote by mail this year, and our people show up and we win. If Florida can win, if Florida goes blue, we've won the White House. Pretty much like, easily. We're not the swing seat, but if we do win, the Republicans just don't have a path. And I think the way we do that is with a really strong vote by mail effort.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just say like voter fraud is fraud. Like that is a fraud, the whole thing about voter fraud and vote by mail. There really isn't any issues there. So that's,
well, it's also like harder to do, right? Like it's easy. I mean, it's not easy. Let me rephrase that. But like I saw a video, I think Vox did a really good one showing, if you're actually concerned about election security, tampering with a voting machine that handles thousands of votes over the course of a day is a far more effective use of your time than having to go to every single individual mailbox, send in a form with a valid signature, get that back. Then like it's a logistical nightmare to actually commit fraud of any actual scale, which is why most people think it's actually far safer than voting in person, to say nothing about the health effect of COVID.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to go to a couple other quick TFC questions, and then we'll come back around if you guys have more questions for Andrew in the last few minutes. What kinds of analytics tools do candidates use? Are there features they wish they had that standard tools don't provide? So Greg, do you want to take part of this one? And then Andrew, I guess, can chime in as well.
Yeah, there's a whole, for some reason the word panoply occurs in my head about all the different tools that somebody like Andrew has to look at. There's tools regarding, there's sort of one main tool that the Democratic Party provides regarding the act of like knocking on doors and making phone calls, sending text messages to track voter contact. There's another tool that does fundraising. Probably both sides of those have plenty of features that are missing, or workflows that could be better. There's stuff like how much social engagement you're getting on your website, or on your Facebook page, traffic on your website, donations from small dollars, donations from larger contributors. and certainly a lot of different places to do it. Things that we've done on this front include building a reporting tool that states can use to monitor voter contact across many, many districts. So Andrew has 20-something compatriots that will be running in other targeted House races in Florida alone. And that means that there are folks that need to track the progress of voter contact efforts, be it phone calls, text messages, or even door knocks in this year. So we've built a tool that we're making available to states we work with that will help them track those metrics over time. And that's an example of a TFC in-house tool that came about because the market for the commercial market for state legislature election monitoring tools is very, very small and certainly unprofitable. But TFC, as a nonprofit with a multi-cycle focus, can come in to build this one specific tool that solves a big problem. If you're able to build better analytics for 20 campaigns in Florida, use that same tool to monitor 20 campaigns in Michigan, then you have a way of scaling impact to monitor your voter contact in many different places. But yeah, there are a lot of analytics tools. Generally, the problem is that they don't talk to each other or are hard to use at large scale. Andrew, what is your 30-second experience on trying to navigate all these tools?
I shouldn't admit to it, but it's usually I wake up and I check Twitter in the morning, and then if I remember at some point, I'll check Instagram. I just use the native ones because it's hard to keep up with just like the mentions and things. So if anybody has any suggestions, I'm all in.
Greg, since we're talking about analytics, someone is asking how we choose which candidates to help. Do you want to give a quick?
Yeah, so we have some folks from this team on the call. So there's a team a volunteer team that builds a predictive model of upcoming elections, of upcoming state legislative elections. So there's literally thousands of them all over the country. Aggregating the data about what's going to happen where is a Herculean task that this team spends a lot of time wrestling with. But at the end of that, come out a series of scenarios for different states and different chambers, like state house versus state senate. So we use the outcome of that data to target those states and chambers by their propensity to flip, or maybe their need to be defended to hold on to Democratic control, or folks that are in a Republican supermajority, which means that Republicans have almost usually 2/3 control over the legislature and don't need Democrats to vote on anything in order to pass changes. And that's often where really gross and terrible things happen. So we use the outputs of that model to come up with our list of states. We then go and talk to the folks in the states. So I don't know how many folks I've talked to in Florida alone, but we train, there's a lot of different groups that support different folks. And so we then align with a state legislative caucus or similar group like a Democratic state party, basically somebody basically an organization in the state that's responsible for getting folks like Andrew elected. We pair up with them and then use both our data from our model and their kind of more qualitative impact or qualitative input about different districts to figure out where to go. From there, we talk to the campaigns, figure out what they need and how we can help.
Great. TJ, do you want to talk a little bit about how people get chosen for projects? And also, we have a good question about, are we doing the same thing on templates with email projects that we're doing with websites?
Two good questions. First, I'll do the email template question. One of our recurring email project team leads is asking that. I know we do have some templates that are out there today on our internal wiki that some of the teams have been using, but we found that there are new, as people are writing some more long form emails, especially right now around COVID and issue-driven messaging, some of our teams are looking for larger templates. So that's a very good idea, and I will try to tap some of our known email marketers who've done this in the past to help us build some fresh versions for you. The second question around how we staff projects. Many people, I think, see the projects in our newsletters today, and these come out once a week. If you're not on the list, I highly recommend subscribing on the website. We list usually anything that's active, so it will give you the opportunity to see website projects, email projects. We're just now starting to get ad projects. You'll click through the link. You can read about the candidates, learn a little bit about their race, the skills and the roles that are needed for that candidate, and volunteer online. I think it's a simple 3-field form, so it's not a big barrier to get in. Once we have people who sign up for projects, we try to validate their skills. So if your LinkedIn profile is current, we'll make sure that if you're signing up for a UX position, you have some UX background. And we try to match everybody with the right skills. If people repeatedly apply for a project and don't get matched, I also try to keep an eye on that and bring them up for another project. What other questions do we have in here?
There's a lot of questions about sort of how we're going to respond with COVID. Are we going to have teenagers helping? Is there a minimum age to help on a TFC campaign? There's no minimum age. We don't ask for age, so there's no rule about age. We don't have a plan to have all teenagers helping right now, but we'll certainly think about how we can engage folks, especially as the fall comes around and texting, a lot of that increases, and we do a lot more text banking and things like that. But we don't ask age, so there's no minimum age. We don't actually know how old anyone is, and that's not important to us. So as long as you're skilled, we're interested in you helping. Cool. Greg, any other questions?
Yeah, I think so. Amy asked about coordinating with other groups and organizations working on state legislatures. We definitely do, like the DLCC and DRC sister district. I think Craig, our newest state director, was a significant sister district volunteer. We'll be sure to be building that relationship. But yeah, the DLCC and redistricting folks we do talk to in Florida, for instance, just to keep picking on Florida. There was a call where, there was a Planned Parenthood affiliate of Ruthless, a local group that facilitates women running for office, and definitely make sure to keep tabs on kind of where folks are adding their own, part of the chain. And through our partnership with usually the caucus or the state party in a given state, it kind of neatly aligns us with a lot of those organizations as well that work through that organization. We have not, there are plenty of groups out there that are focused on particular issues and kind of run their own map. We've chosen to focus on chamber level control and chamber level outcomes, and that means working with the folks in the state who are responsible for making that happen. And so it is sort of a nice streamlined way to work, kind of on the things that we do best, make sure that we're complementing what other groups do.
Okay, I'll give one more question for TJ, and we can answer some of your questions on social media later. One more question for TJ, one more question for Andrew. TJ, it's a question of, are TFC state directors selecting volunteers, or does the candidate provide input on volunteers?
Right now, my team, and it's me, I'm pairing the volunteers up with the projects. So the state directors will be in charge of the relationship with the state party and the state caucus. They really make sure that we know what candidates are ready for projects and help keep that pipeline moving. But when it comes to staffing, I'm working on that directly with each of the projects and the volunteers themselves.
And then I would just add that we have a matching system that does a good bulk of the work. So once a project comes in, we know the skill sets that kind of project needs. And then volunteers are alerted via email. So if you're not getting TFC email for some reason, definitely check your promotions or social folder or spam, because we have a very, very important KPI in the organization that we staff projects within a week. So if you miss it, you will miss the opportunity to volunteer. You have about 4 days total to respond. And this year we'll also start texting people to see if they are able to join a project. So it's going to happen even faster. So we're really excited about that. And it's been really important to the campaigns to be able to see the teams get up and running quickly. So a week or less is how we target staffing projects, and TJ and team are really, really handling that in a heroic way right now. So we'll end with one question from Larissa. Andrew, she's asking, other than money and scale, what do you feel like are the biggest hurdles you're facing in your get the message out in Florida?
It's, I think the biggest thing right now is the lack of like human interaction, right? And I think that's where you guys really come in, is helping us like find ways to communicate in a way, because we have to fill that void somehow. This campaign is going to look like nothing anybody's ever seen. You know, yes, like paid ads are going to be important, but at the same time, like there are ways to like kind of cut through the noise, and anything creative that anybody has, like we're all ears. We have to be able to outsmart these guys because they're you know really pretty sinister in what they're trying to accomplish. And if we can't beat them with dollars, we have to beat them in other ways. And I think just making sure we all run really effective, well-polished campaigns that look professional, look the part. It makes it easier for those undecided voters who are going to do nothing more than Google us for 5 seconds on their smartphone. They'll be like, oh, Andrew seems pretty legit. I like his, oh, that's a funny quirk that they wrote for him about the chicken tender subs. You know, I'll vote for that guy. Because honestly, that's what it comes down to a lot of times. And so, yeah, you guys have been awesome for that.
And then I'll just take one more question. Andrew, you can chime in too, because this, if you can't tell, the importance of states is a soapbox that I tend not to descend from. But someone's asking, do you consider the quote unquote up ballot effects in your prioritization model, meaning our prioritization model, meaning the effect your efforts will have on the presidential race?
Oh, sorry. This is like my soapbox too. So I'm gonna
yeah.
100%. We are gonna invest $1 billion in a presidential race where we are gonna have a 70% fall off, but by the time they get to the state house candidates that will draw the maps that will define elections for the next decade. And I mean, and I like on a purely practical perspective, like if a tenth of that money, if like a fraction of it went to down ballot candidates, because I don't care who you are, if you're running for the Soil and Water Commission seat in your neighborhood and you're going to have 500 votes, you're going to go get 20 of your friends and you're going to physically drag them to go vote for you. Those people are not going to forget to vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, right? It's not like they like bypass 30 line items to get to the very bottom and vote for the Soil and Water Commissioner. They're going to do the other stuff. But if you go find that low information voter and you drag them to the poll and you say, you know, go vote, they probably will just vote for the top one and then stop, right? So, and, you know, spoiler alert, a lot of my friends are going to vote for the Democrat. So we really should be empowering, I think, as far down the ballot as humanly possible to get out the vote for our top of the ticket as well.
And I'll just add, anything that you can do to help in a state that is especially a swing state is going to help at the presidential level, because that's just how voting works, number one. Number two, I think people tend to think like even in states that have independent commissions for redistricting and stuff like that, you don't need to pay attention anymore. But the fact of the matter is that voting rights are decided at the state legislative level. So Michigan is an example of a state that now has an independent commission, but voting rights are being decided by a Republican majority in the House and Senate there. So I'll give you an example from David Daly, who wrote the book Rat Fucked, which is in Wisconsin, Trump won by, I think, about 22,000 votes. And it was later found by a federal court that the state legislature there, which is, as people probably know from a few weeks ago, very Republican, even though they have a Democratic governor, they had passed laws that prevented about 300,000 people from voting. So it's actually the state legislature that's passing voting rights legislation or preventing people from voting that does affect who gets elected at the highest level. So I can't say any more about how much the down ballot races affect both the federal races at the House level, but also at the presidential level. And that is what makes them such an amazing investment. Like if you live in a place where you're working on a startup or you work at a tech company and you want to think like, where can I put my limited time and money to the best use? There is just no question all the time, but particularly in 2020, that it's state House races and state Senate races. So with that, I will end it. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being on with us for the entire hour. Thank you, TJ, Alan, Greg, as always. And people know where to find us online at techforcampaigns.org or on various social media channels. We're ramping up now, as we said at the beginning, over 100 campaigns, over 250 projects. So volunteer, be responsive, get your friends to volunteer as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks. Hey, Jessica, you have a beautiful home, by the way. And I like how you've delegated Alan to a box, apparently. Thanks,
this
guys.
Is a virtual background, just so you know.
Appreciate you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.